Call of Duty Black Ops 3 marks the 12th entry in the franchise and stands as a direct sequel to 2012's Black Ops 2. Despite the monumental commercial success the game received, personally, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the weakest games in the entire series. Yes, it has some substantial single-player content regarding the campaign, which is what's being covered here. Yes, this game is very experimental, but that's its downfall on both fronts. Black Ops 3 is, objectively, overlong, it's confusing, and it's absurdly broken to a hysterical level. If Call of Duty was adapted as a cartoon, it would be this game. I absolutely despised this game at first, and grew to like it at least a bit more about halfway through it. That's not a good feeling you want to bestow upon your audience as a games developer. There's a number of different design and narrative choices that really drags down this game's quality. The biggest issue with Black Ops 3, however, without a doubt, has to be its story. This is one of the worst narratives in the entire series. The setting of the game is placed within the year 2065, around 4 decades after Black Ops 2. Why is there such a major jump in time between both games? Your guess is as good as mine. The story follows a team of Black Ops operatives, with the player character being a cybernetically enhanced super soldier. A third Cold War breaks out between two alliances on the global stage, between the Winslow Accord and the Common Defense Pact. The main characters, including the player character, works for the Winslow Accord. Several countries spanning the globe have developed advanced military technology, where robotics play a dominant role on the battlefield. As a result, the game is filled with robot drones and cyborg super soldiers as enemy units. There's also widespread fear that the robots will eventually turn on their makers and stage a takeover. The premise of this alone, just from the sound of it, is very unorthodox for a Call of Duty game. This entire story goes off the rails quick and nosedives into pure stupidity once it introduces a stage where you enter a World War II simulation that has ghost direwolves and fake German soldiers bum rushing you to death, which is made worse if you're playing on veteran difficulty like I did. At that point, I had to permanently shut my mind off and ignore the rest of the plot, which truthfully lost me hours earlier anyway. Whereas Advanced Warfare struck a fine balance between old and new and still managed to find common ground with the usual Call of Duty formula, Black Ops 3 instead jumps the shark and never returns back to the realm of common sense. To say that this story has any sort of narrative value for the player is quite frankly an insult to every fan of this franchise, whether you like this game or not. But if the story wasn't enough to make you shy away from this unremarkable entry, then the even more obtuse gameplay will probably do the trick. It's rather baffling how developer Treyarch managed to introduce so much yet innovate so little when it comes to the gameplay in this. I'm not even going to say that the game's mechanics and systems don't have any thought put into them. Rather, the problem is that the game doesn't need them in the first place. There's so many random, unnecessary gameplay mechanics in here, like wall running, remote hacking turrets and mechs, character customization, some strange OCD reward system that ironically makes the game even more of a chore to play than any other Call of Duty game that came before this one, a second reserve system where the player is granted an extra life when downed in combat, which is fucking stupid by the way. But these things only scratch the surface of what's wrong with this game. They added, and I shit you not, a mechanic called Tactical Mode that literally breaks the entire game. There is no limit on this nonsense. It's highly customizable, allowing the player to get information on literally every enemy and or ally that's present on screen. And the player is encouraged by your AI companions to use it.
Visibility's getting worse. Activate tactical mode so they don't get the drop on us.
What tactical mode does is it allows the player to see every single enemy on screen. Not only that, it tells the player when enemies are nearby, and it shows enemy units through walls, which includes units across the battlefield several yards away. This mechanic is so broken that it frustratingly removed the challenge of the game, which in turn removes the fun from the game. Why would you do this? None of the other Call of Duty games had this with the exception of Advanced Warfare's threat grenades, whose see-through effect was temporary. It blows my mind that the dev team thought it was a good idea to put such a mechanic and have it be unlimited in this game, when it would have been all the better without it. The game focuses too much on empowering the player that it ends up overshooting the attempt and instead makes the player nearly unstoppable. It's probably telling why they implemented a ridiculous difficulty setting, realistic, where the player dies automatically if they're hit once with just one bullet, which is the farthest thing from being realistic. Why such an asinine difficulty setting even exists in this mess, again, your guess is as good as mine. Then, not only do they overpower the hell out of the player, but they also make it their mission to keep the player stocked up on ammo throughout the entire game with these random ammo crates scattered around each level. And even though these are found in other Call of Duty games, the result of having these things here in this game specifically just further exacerbates the problem of the player being overpowered. Regarding the question of challenge, where is the balance here? It's an honest question that deserves some debate. Now, not everything in this game is bad or poorly executed. I will give a shout out for 2 different missions in the game, those being Hypocenter, where the player character and another companion infiltrates a weapons research facility. The framing of that mission was very strong, and the level design was pretty dynamic. And the second being Sandcastle, which despite this game's unrelenting bullshit, has to be one of the best Call of Duty campaign missions in the entire franchise. Easily a top 10 contender, if only the rest of the game stood up on the same pedestal. So, Call of Duty Black Ops 3. It's not very good, despite the effort. It's just a weird game with a dumb, poorly executed story that doesn't really bring any sort of innovation into the series, unlike the game that succeeded this one a year later.